Figaro. Figaro, Figaro, Figaro. Yeah, we're recording. Episode 16.
Oh, yeah.
This is John with a J.
And I'm Bodhi Ray. And today we have the 6 Stages of Awakening by Christina Lopes. This video was referred to me by a friend. Shout out to Roots. I never heard of Christina before. This is my first exposure to her. What about you?
Nope. Never have I ever Christina Lopes before. let me take let me drink.
But however, though, I thought this video, the 6 Stages of Awakening, I thought she did a really good job explaining the process. It was very concise. I like the way how she articulated, and I like the way that she kind of gave in the beginning, saying how, these stages can kind of happen in different order. We're in linear time. It doesn't always going to be that way. So kind of, telling people, and I think this is a very good video for people who might be going through an awakening and maybe are a little confused. I've been through this whole cycle more than once. So I'll kind of chime in and give you some of my stuff, what happened to me and my experiences as well.
Sure, that'll be very interesting because I think we've had very different experiences as far as the stages or the number of times are concerned, which should be contrastingly intriguing for sure. And look at you just jumping right in it today, like you're just ready to do this. Bodhi woke, as it were, as he joined us today. Bodhi Ray was Bodhi woke. But we both admittingly are very sleepy, and we were like, that's okay. We're going to power through, and when we hit record, the adrenaline is just going to through the roof, and we're going to be rocking and rolling. So
yeah, I'm not feeling very woke today, but
we're going to get there. By the end of this video, we're going to be pumped because it is a good video. Christina Lopes, aka the Heart Alchemist, with almost 1 million views on this video. So it's been getting some traction. And I would definitely concur with you that there's value here. I loved her look. I loved, the half shaved head thing. Love that. Yeah. I loved her feel. I loved her delivery. I mean, it was just seamless flow. She just boom, from the heart, from the heart, from the heart. She never stuttered, stopped, paused. I don't think
she knew what she was talking about.
Yeah, there was no editing going on in this video. It was just like stream of conscious flow, man. So I always appreciate that. And I also was like, where the flock of seagulls was this video when I was going through my hells? And we're like, this would have been a wonderful companion to just at least be able to go, okay, so all this is normal. Okay, like yeah. a little friendly field guide, if you would. And I had wonderful support come to me in so many ways from so many people, whether knowing or unknowingly, because I was blind to it or not open to it. But it was certainly, it came to me in floods, and I'm very grateful for that. However, it was never delivered to me in this beautiful little package of a 47-minute video where I could someone can go, oh, it sounds like you're going through an awakening here. Maybe watch this video. It will be helpful. No, it was people poking at me or like whispering behind my back or making fun of me, or these were some of the non-loving ways, or just watching me from afar going, oh my gosh, he's like 40 years old going through his first awakening. Like, look at the freak. Look at him flounder. Look at him flail. Look at him do all the awakening things. Remember when we were 20 and we went through our first awakening? He's just now going through his. Like, this video would have been a lot more just compassionate and like a nice side by side.
I could have definitely used this video 5 or 6 years ago.
Good. So I'm not alone in that either. Like, so Christina, thank you for creating something for people that are just now maybe feeling like they're going through it, or they're halfway through it, or wherever they're at. At least they have an outlet now to say, aside from friends, family, and pokers and prodders, like something to give them a little lift and support during these
I should
turbulent
note though
times.
that what she explains to me, the way I see it, is somebody going through their first awakening
Mm.
cycle, and it could be some confusing because you may get to a point where you think like, oh, I made it.
Right,
And
right.
you know what? You don't realize that this could happen in cycles. It's almost, if you think about it, it's almost like a spiral, like a corkscrew coming out. So this cycle, you know, and she gives the times, you know, an approximate time for each stage of the cycle. But you can go through mini cycles of this, which I've gone through. I'm going through a mini cycle of this year. I've gone through the dark night of the soul ego. I've gone through almost all the stages just this year.
Wow.
So I've gone through that, but I've known from the past when I went through it, and it took kind of what she said. Those approximate times were pretty accurate. I went through this about, I guess, around 2015 to 2017. I don't know, maybe like around that. And I remember thinking like, oh, done with that. And then bam, you know, it's always
Yeah,
something. So,
yeah.
but because I went through it before, I kind of knew how to get through it. And we'll talk about how some of the tips that she said to go, how to get through it faster, which, you know, and I think there's something that she left out that
Oh
I
yeah,
think,
oh yeah. The first time I watched it, I was like, man, she left so much out. Second time I watched it, I was like, all right, it's still a good intro, and like it's a good foundation to build upon. But there's definitely maybe an accent video or a next video that she could make. Maybe she has made one, I don't know, but something a little more layered, a little more with a little more support in there, and some ideas for navigating the treacherous seas of the spiritual awakening. And to your point about, you know, going through what you're going through now, and the different, the spiral and stuff. See, what I found for me is prior to 2012, I think I had, and a lot of people can experience this too, mini awakenings, to where you
right,
get to stage one and then you just like shut it down. You know, your subconscious just says, nope, I'm not ready for this. Or, oh my God, the world's, you grace the shores of the stage two, which is bliss. And then you go, no, because you're not ready yet. You're fearful of that because of your program or whatever. And you don't make it to stage two, which is that bliss. And so you shut down. So I think up to 2012, I had a lot of mini awakenings,
yeah,
to where I was
same,
like, and I'm awake. I finally I understand what my high school teacher was talking about when he went around in our senior year and he kept going, when are you guys going to wake up? When are you going to wake up? And I'm like, what is he talking about? Like, I'm ready for the day. I'm wide awake. Like, what is he, you know? And then I'm like 25 years old and I'm like, oh, he means this. Like, I'm woke now. No, I wasn't woke. I was flirting with stage one, basically, which is fine. And we all have our traumas that keep us, I think, um, suppressed in certain stages, or allowing us to develop into the other stages. But for
right.
me personally, it wasn't until 2012 that I experienced the full wave of the 6 stages. Now, here's the funny part, right? And we could talk about this all along the way of this podcast. I have just now reached stage this year, I would say maybe even January, reached stage 6 of that initial awakening that commenced in 2012. So I took my sweet ass stubborn time on
Wow, 8
each.
years.
Yeah, yeah. So she's like, maybe you could spend a few days to a few weeks. For me, every stage was remarkably more than what she said you could spend it in. For me, it was weeks and months, or pretty much years and years, years and years, years and years. So I stayed in the, dude, I basked in the bliss stage, which was stage 2, by the way, folks, and we'll get to that. But I stayed there for like 2 years, man, because
Yeah.
who would want to leave? And
All
when
right.
I,
Well, why don't we get into the stages,
let's
and
do
then
that.
when we get a stage, we can, instead of bouncing around, we can kind
Yeah,
of say what we think.
let's
So
do that. It's a
the
good
first
idea.
stage and the sixth stage is the wake up call. This is sort of like the on switch, and she says that it usually occurs through two different ways. One way is chaos, and the other one is spontaneous. For me, my very first wake up was actually in college in class, and I was taking a class of Southeast Asia, and they were explaining basically they were explaining oneness. I think she was talking about Hinduism, and she was saying something how we're all drops of water and we all kind of merge into the river of oneness. I don't remember exactly the wording, but it was something similar to that. And that was the first time I've ever heard of anything like that, of oneness. Now, I mean, you go on any kind of spiritual site or anything like that, and it's pretty common now to hear that. But that was the first time I've ever heard that. And it was sort of like a little switch went off, and I was like, yeah, like that's how it is. We're all part of one thing, and we all kind of become oneness as, I don't know, as we awaken or, move through stages.
Yeah.
So that was actually my first like kind of little wake up call with the switch turning on.
I had a little one in college too, and it was just the teacher, it was a literature class or something, and the teacher decided for some reason we were going to do some transcendental meditation, shut off all the lights, put a candle on, and this was the first time I ever really meditated, ever. And I'm like, all right, I'm down, let's do it. And it just blew talk about your introduction to universal oneness. It was like, fireworks were like, what is this feeling I'm going through? And when everyone shared at the end of, the end of the session or whatever, dude, mine, inside it sounded and felt like a Salvador Dali painting, but when I explained it, I'm sure it more translated like a Jackson Pollock painting, and people were like, what is he talking about? Like, it's just a mess everywhere. But for me, it was transcendent. It was like transcendental meditation, right? I was like, oh shit, I'm seeing life through a new set of eyes, just through one meditation.
Wow. I know she gives the example of Michael Singer, who wrote the book Untethered Soul. Great book if you never read that.
Never read it. No.
So, I mean, that's an example of somebody. Another example of somebody who having spontaneous would be the great Indian saint Ramana Maharshi. He contemplated death when he was like 13, lay down in his father's study and just said, okay, like I'm ready to die. I'm going to die. Went through that and just became completely enlightened at like 13 or 14 years old and never came down, never had anything. So I guess it can happen. So, but usually that's pretty rare, very rare.
Yeah. So yeah. So for me, and then I would have to say, I am a stubborn son of a gun, Ray, and just have always been as a child, as an adult. So maybe that's why my awakening stages lasted 8 years. Stages, excuse me. But also in this college class, dude, that was one of many. Like I had so many opportunities, so many presentations of, John, wake up, like, boom, here's this, here's that, here's that. I mean, I could go on and on, at least a dozen, but didn't shake me enough.
Right.
Because it wasn't, I guess for me, I personally needed the jagged rocks of the bottom. And having that chaos.
Like you said, you have those mini awakenings, and it's sort of almost like waking up in the middle of the night. You kind of roll over and you wake up for a few seconds, but then you kind of just fall right back asleep. So it doesn't really stay, but it shows you that possibility though. And sometimes it can kind of give you, sometimes it's maybe like a light going off and somewhere, and you see like, oh, I wonder what that is. Okay. It can kind of lead you towards that journey of want to explore what that is.
Yeah.
Too, so.
And I think all those introductions to that doorway of that light and that potential journey, finally when I hit rock bottom and it was just like, fuck it, what do I got to lose in this potential land of bliss out here? Let me just step in and see what it's all about. So what if I die, right? And then it was just the opposite. It was like, oh God, this is what, and we'll get there, but this is what life could be. Oh, yay! Above the clouds.
Right. So next is what? The bliss? Well, did we talk about the bliss enough?
No, because that's
so with the bliss.
Never enough.
The bliss is sort of like when you're in that high, you're in that zone, and you think that like this is enlightenment. I'm enlightened now. And you feel free and connected and everything is great. And if someone were to tell you, hey, you know what? Maybe you should do some shadow work. You would probably just laugh your ass off at that person and think they were the most ridiculous thing ever. Like, why would I need shadow work? I'm already there. You know what? I don't need any of that.
I'm not scared of anything. These were the bypassing days, man. I think that bliss and bypassing go hand in hand, but I think that's also okay though.
Yeah.
because I used to judge that, and I used to be like, "Oh, you're bypassing your body." But I think you have to allow people that bliss, and just that unadulterated, that even mild ignorance of where they're currently at. And maybe, remember I said like people weren't like interjecting and saying, "Hey, John, here's this video, or here's this book you should read." That and some people did try to give me a book, but I wasn't hearing it. It was kind of like shadow work. I'm like, I don't need your book. I've got all the answers. I don't need it. I don't need it. So I think some angels really showed up in some wonderfully supportive, gentle ways, but allowing me the space to breathe into that bliss, because I think that bliss really helps you through the next stages, and really gives you a hope to hold on to as you start to go through the shit.
Well, yeah, holding on to bliss could be, I know a lot of times too, that could be sort of an obstacle, is maybe you have that experience that have brought you that bliss, that huge, oh my God, it's great awakening. And then when you start to go down, you try to recreate that, and you try to do everything you can to kind of try to capture that high again. So
Guilty.
you may go, okay, that book or that teaching, or you may be addicted to a teacher or going on a certain retreat. And, you try to like, walk, retrace your steps that you took initially.
Yep.
So you have to realize that everything here and all these stages, it all happens for a reason, and not try to hold on to one stage or push away another stage for
I
something else.
left stage 2 kicking and screaming. I'm like, no, my whole life has been torture and terror. Let me stay here. And it was my partner that was just like gently and gracefully just tugging me like, hey, there's more to learn. And I'm like, no, that looks shitty. No, I'm starting to feel like, no, I want this. And she's like, come on, just trust me. I'm like, oh, fine. And thankfully, again, another angel in my corner coercing me through the stages, which brings us to the next stage, right?
Yeah, it's
What's the next stage?
I don't know.
3?
What's that?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. I can hear you
Oh,
now.
what's stage 3?
Stage 3 is the dark night, which I like that she calls it the dark night of the ego as opposed to the dark night of the soul. This is a really hard, heavy time. This is basically, you feel like you're totally off the path, and you start questioning yourself, questioning, who am I? What's my journey? What's my purpose? Everything falls apart. Everything that you ever done to kind of feel that bliss or try to feed off that spirituality, that intuition, all that stuff just goes away, and you just feel like crap.
So in your first major dark night of the ego, we'll call it. Didn't she also call it like, oh, the Great Purge? She also calls it the Great Purge, which I identified with. But you identified with the dark night of the ego. How long would you say you dwelled there for?
I would say the first time was probably a few years. So it's probably from 2014 to about 2014 to about 2016, maybe 2.5 years that I went through that. And I just thought my life was over. And I was thinking, I had all these expectations of, from the bliss, you think, oh, everything's gonna be great and you're gonna do all this stuff, and everything went away. And then I also went through it again this year. I was in the bliss stage, and then my relationship ended that I was very attached to, which was a trauma relationship. And then everything was just miserable. Usually what I noticed, basically what the dark night is some kind of unresolved trauma that comes up, that gets triggered. So really, that's really what it is. At least that's what usually starts it, is something that you didn't know was there, something in your subconscious that you were totally unaware of. Something kind of triggers that pulls that to resurface, and it just hits you, and it can, it's pretty bad.
So you would say that would you say, I want to make an assumption for you, would you say that it would serve one well to be patient and dwell for as long as possible in the dark night of the ego, to allow all of these traumas to surface and to do that shadow work, right?
Right.
Like this is the time to get dirty. This is the time to know you're not going to drown in the mud, but it's going to be thick and it's going to be heavy, and but you're not alone, and that if you keep committing to this work and the darkness that you're in and embracing it versus pushing it away, that will serve you exceptionally well.
Yeah, that's the fastest way to get through it, like you said, is to embrace it. And this past time, I would get the flood of thoughts would come in, and I would just like I used what she goes before is just witnessing all of it, and and watching it all and facing it, facing everything that came my way, all the feelings, all the pain, all the sorrow, all the sadness. I knew not to try to cope, not to try to suppress that. So I went right into that because I know the fastest way to get through it is to go into it.
Right.
So that's what I did, and that's what made me get through it in months rather than years, like last time.
Hmm.
Because last time when I first went through it, I was the master at suppressing emotions. I was the master at suppressing anger because I thought anger was bad and all this stuff. So then when it got triggered, it was like, wow, all this, and I thought I healed some of it, and then I just found out there's all this other layers of stuff that was just right beneath that needed to
Right.
be healed as well.
Very, very interesting.
Ramdas has a good video too about the Dark Night of the Soul. It's like a 10-minute video, so I
I'm gonna
kind of recommend that.
I'm gonna
He
write
kind of
that
explains
down.
it a little differently though. He explains it as when you start losing the physical world, but you're not really totally into the spiritual world yet. So, but it's a really good video too. It's a short video, so I kind of recommend that.
We'll put it in the
Yeah,
description below with Michael Tether's book as well. What Michael, is that his name?
Michael Singer.
Michael Singer. Oh, Michael Tether, the untethered soul. Right, something like
Yes.
that. Michael Singer. Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah, yeah. It'll be in the description. So now, also in stage 3, before we move on, like I said, she also calls it the Great Purge. I think some people will witness in that stage an actual inclination to purge things from their life. I've talked with many people that give away everything.
Right.
And for me, it was just a natural occurrence. I started just giving away all of my stuff, my books, all my worldly possessions. I'm like, I would post them on Facebook. I'm like, who wants this? Who wants that? Who wants this? At the same time, by no profound design, mind you, folks, but just the crushing nature of a spiritual awakening in the world around you. My house was literally slated to be bulldozed. My relationship had crumbled. My friends around me were all disappearing. So, I mean, I'm getting like just dragged through this dark night, like in the most just hellacious of what it felt like in the moment of ways. Like life's not fair, just kicking and screaming, like I said, leaving this beautiful land of bliss and go, I just want to stay longer, and the awakening's going, nope, you need to move on to the next part of this process. You've been here long enough. And yeah, just giving everything away because you feel like you're dying, right? And so what do you do when you're dying? You're like, you leave a will or whatever. But she even talks about that. She talks about physically dying and late in later stages. But I think you can feel certain things in certain stages to certain
There's
degrees.
one thing that she didn't really explain really about awakening is what you are actually awakening from, or what is actually what's being awakened. So really what's being awakened is consciousness, awareness, the deepest part of what you are, which is loving awareness. And really what's falling away is the conceptual self, the illusionary self, the self that's based on who you thought you were based upon your experiences, your social conditioning, all that stuff. So it's a story that you've become attached to, that the story of me. And really that's what's falling apart. That's what's dying, is that story.
Mm.
So the true self, the true being can come through. So that's really what's waking up, is consciousness waking up to itself. So she didn't really explain that. So I think that's kind of a good thing to put in there.
You just did it quite beautifully. And thank you for that illumination, Bodhi woke. Yeah, and I think that makes sense too. Why folks would have that desire to detach from their attachments too. Like, this doesn't define me. These things that used to define me, these things that I used to find value in, that identified me. That, you know, my friends would come over and go, "Look at his stuff." Like, I'm like, I don't want it anymore. Like, you take it. I don't need it. All I need is the shirt on my back and my Bodhi beads, which I still have at the time and still have them. Same set.
Nice.
My dancing beads. But yeah, man, that's oh gosh, it makes, looking back at those times, the dark night of the ego, Ray. Woo! Man.
Heavy period.
And the fact that you went through it more than once, man, like, gosh.
Yeah.
But while I'm thinking of it, you also mentioned that you were in a bliss stage again. So you managed to get to a bliss stage again.
Right.
And so what was that like the second time, if I can ask?
Oh, the second time was great. I thought everything was going smooth, and I thought my life was set, and I was very attached to the idea of my future. You know, I'm like, okay, this is what's going to happen. I'm with her. Everything's going great. We're going to get married, and this is going to happen. The mind kind of plans this stuff out, and I was projecting so much. I was projecting onto her. I was really, what I realized, she was reflecting back to me my inner child. So really, through her, I was actually loving my inner child through her. She was a reflection of that. So really, that's really what it was. So then when whatever that ended, it was like I couldn't find that connection no more to my inner child, which needed healing from that abandonment.
Wow.
So I had to do that, and I had to go through the shadow work and deal with abandonment issues in this life and also in past lives.
My goodness, I'm glad you brought that up. That's because that's something that often gets neglected or bypassed, or is not, you know, just not considered as deeply as it should, because it's very valid. Right. Yeah, for some of us more deeply than others, and further back, you know, as well. But we're, as you and I are displaying here, we all have very, very different journeys. So even though she sets us up as these are the 6 stages of awakening, that could look very different. And maybe
I think sometimes too, they kind of bleed into each other.
She did say that. Yeah.
Yeah. They kind of like, so the wake up call and the bliss can kind of be, there's, you know, definitely like way over an overlapping in that, because a lot of times the wake up call can just totally bring upon that bliss. So the next number 4 is the void. That's kind of when you're in no man's land. We're kind of stopped. You're sort of in that in-between stage between the dark night. You're sort of out of that, but you haven't really taken that step yet into, would it be what, grounding or groundedness?
Yeah, she
so
says
it's sort of a stage where you're kind of like, basically she says kind of like a cocooning.
Yeah, the great rest.
Yes, the great rest. And it can be kind of a frustrating journey, because you want to be so out of that. You want to be back in that bliss. You want to be back into like where you were at before. And you feel like you kind of feel like you've healed that stuff. You feel like you healed that stuff from the dark night. You feel like you did the shadow work. You feel like you're over it. And you're just kind of like, okay.
Stuck.
Come on.
Stagnant.
Yes. You feel stagnant, and you're just kind of waiting for that
so
energy.
Frustrating. That, I remember that being frustrating. She says you might feel lost, or you might have anxiety, which would make sense if you're just like treading water. Like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? Now that the universe, as she says, has closed all the doors for you, everything's closed. What now? My job's gone. My house is gone. My old relationship, my friends are gone. It's just me. Like, what the freak do I do now? And she calls it an illusion of disconnection. Too, like I was once, Source and I were one. I was in the holy flow. Like, I was manifesting ravens on my shoulder and snakes around my ankles, and like I could call anything, you know.
And you feel like you'll never get back to that.
Right. Like, I have lost my wizard powers. They're gone. And great. Now I'm in this this funk of stagnation, the great rest. What do you do? And that's exactly what she says to do. You honor where you're at and you rest.
I think to get through that stage is really about self-care.
That's really that. Very well said.
I think that's how you get through that stage of self-care, and going back and just loving yourself and making that commitment to, yeah, just to do what's right for yourself and putting yourself first for a while.
What she refers to, I'm sorry, what she refers to as spiritual practices. I like the way you put it better, because I think it's more enticing for a grander audience to say self-care. You know, it's sometimes when you say spiritual practices, it pushes people away. But I think if you profoundly commit to self-care here, that really what you're doing is you're taking care of that resting period. So whatever comes up for you, and self-care could be just sitting on the couch and listening to music. It could be sitting on your porch and watching the birds, like not having to feel productive or do anything. Shit, dude, if you've been through the bliss and the dark night of the ego and all of that work leading up to this, you need a rest. You don't need to keep going. I got to get to the next stage. I've got to transcend. I've got to elevate. You got to do nothing but rest and let all of that work marinate, I think, right?
Yeah, that's a good part. Marinate and maybe do some meditation and just maybe some silence and just go within and kind of care for yourself, and you'll get through it. You'll get through it.
And I think during this phase, people must experience depression. I think even though you're through the dark night of the soul, I think those things, and she doesn't talk about this in the video, that all throughout these stages, emotions are going to come up. What do I do with them? What do you do if you're in stage 4 and anger comes up? Have you failed your awakening? Are you back? Did you go back 2 stages? Or are you just there? What did you say? You said honor it, right?
You honor it. The anger that comes up, you bow to it, you honor it, and you see it for what it is. Okay, anger. You don't judge it. You allow it. You allow it to flow. And if it keeps coming up consistently, then maybe there's some other work to do. But you just honor it and you accept it and you let it go. You let it go.
She says in this particular stage, and I want to emphasize this, that this is the start, and the emphasis on the word start. This is the start of where we step into our true authenticity and power. But it's just the beginning. Like, you don't step 4, you're like, I'm here, like now I'm authentic. As you and I have talked before, there's so many layers to peel to get to our true authentic self and to be an expression vividly of it.
It's almost like when you're like in sports, you're like maybe like in the tunnel and you're ready to go out in the playing field and you haven't even been called out yet and you're just waiting. You're ready. You want to go out there and you want to play so bad, but you're just in that no man's land. You're kind of in that sort of almost like a purgatory in a way. You know, you're kind of not really, you're through that stage and you're ready to move on, but you're just kind of, the universe isn't really doing anything for you. So gotcha. you maybe feel kind of like apathetic a little bit in that stage.
This is the first video, or really not just video, but anything, material that has come to me that has validated that portion of my personal journey. Like, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know
I've never heard of it before this video.
But when I was watching, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you, Christina. Thank you, Christina. Like, thank you for making this a thing, a tangible thing. Like, and so people can connect with that and feel like just that validation and that support and that understanding, like, okay, I'm not the first to go through this. And this is actually a thing. I'm not stuck. I'm just in a place that I need to be right now to begin the next stage. Like you said, I'm going to get to play the game, but right now I'm in the tunnel, and that's fine. Like, yeah. All right. When they shoot the cannon off, I'm going to get to barrel out onto the field, man. Wearing the NFL jersey, by the way, for those of you not watching but listening today, in lieu of today's opening day, the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Houston Texans. That's right. Here on the Bodhi Bros, we actually don't mind talking about football because, well, it's just a part of our life, and where we've been and where we're headed. Ray and I are actually in a fantasy league together. Oh my, have I overshared? Psst, come on, it is what it is. Whatever. Football's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. Moving on. Yeah, the tunnel, Ray. I love that. That's a very good analogy. And thank you for drawing that up for us.
All
And
right,
for
so on to the number 5, which is
oh shit.
groundedness. Number 5, groundedness, which is basically you've grown up, spiritually mature, you're powerful into manifesting, your connection returns. So it's kind of like you're sort of like you're back on. You got the things are start flowing again. You're back in the flow. Life's moving. Things are happening. Like she said, you're more mature now. You don't have that kind of that innocent ignorance of the first stage of bliss where you're sort of like a teen and you're not naive anymore. So it's sort of you're kind of balanced. It's kind of a balanced energy. You're grounded, but you're also in touch with the higher sense of self, the deeper sense of self. Maybe I guess you could say like the higher chakras. So you're sort of in a good alignment.
I think when you can finally just allow that stage 4 to be what it is, as we said, and not resist it and try to fix it or try to aspire to delve beyond it, that's when that feeling just starts to settle in, and stage 5 says, I'm here. And you almost like walk out in your robes, you're like Jedi robe, and you're like, okay, I'm an adult now. I understand the kicking and screaming, leaving bliss and taking myself through the dark, treacherous lava seas of the night of the ego, et cetera, et cetera. But now I'm here and I understand not just myself more, but other people. And you know what? I'm ready to connect again. I'm ready to not be in isolation or depression or connection, but I'm ready to be out in the community again. And I'm not seeking out danger, but I'm not as scared of people now and confrontation and just being a human being with other human beings, maybe as I was before, because I didn't understand myself and what I was projecting out into the world and what mirrors were being presented to me, and that everyone has a story and everyone has their traumas and pains, and maybe, just maybe, the people that are coming face to face with me have very much experienced the similar pains that I've witnessed as well, and we can connect on that level, not in fear, but in love and compassion for each other.
Yeah, I think it brings back a sense of compassion, like you said, compassion for other people suffering because you've been through it before, so you can kind of relate. I think this is the stage where you understand suffering is really grace, and you acquire that wisdom. You gain that wisdom from your suffering, and you see that there was a purpose to it, and that it did contribute to your growth and your evolution to who you are in this stage. So
what else does she talk about in this stage? Something about your energy system becomes more powerful in this stage as you begin your grounding in your groundedness. Your body starts to change. You start to feel stronger. Maybe even your hair in certain places starts to grow back in places that it was being lost. Your skin looks shinier. Maybe your posture even changes because you're walking in more confidence. And your systems, your internal systems have been reset, so to speak, or are in the process of resetting as you've shed one skin and you're being born into the other. And it's a very exciting time if you continue to take care of yourself. As Ray said, self-care is monumental here throughout every stage, I think.
right.
You can actually set yourself back, as maybe why it took me so long, because I'm so stubborn, with taking care of myself, with eating the proper foods and surrounding myself with the most ideal, clean living like elements, and ridding myself of uh, toxic behaviors or ingestibles, if you will. I haven't drank in over 10 years for the most part. I don't smoke cigarettes or anything like that, but there's plenty of other things that we could put in our body that are just not good for us.
Right.
And in some cases, something that's good for your body might be poisonous in my body, Ray. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to eat all or get and do all this stuff, but potatoes for you might be a power food. For me, it might be something that contributes to,
I
gout or
think I
something.
think it's about living more authentically in this
Yeah,
stage.
there you go. I think that puts it in a wonderful nutshell.
Yeah. So the last stage is purpose and life mission. Basically, you're living your life mission. You're living your purpose, and you're committed to your soul's path. So, and she says this one goes on forever. That's yes, maybe no. We'll see. You don't really know until you're
Yeah, why
actually.
do you say that? Why do you say that?
Well, you may think that you did all of this, you went through this whole cycle, and you may think like, okay, I'm done. I went through the dark night. I purged all this stuff, and yes, and you're proud and you feel good, and the bliss starts to return. And there could be something in your subconscious that you don't, because you don't know what you don't know.
Go ahead, drop
So
that one. Drop it on him, Ray. Tell him,
yeah,
Ray.
you don't know what you don't know. So there could still be something left inside that needs to be purged, that needs to be healed. And you may come across it unexpectedly, thinking like, okay, I've done this journey before, and here you go.
Oh, I
Again.
wholeheartedly know that that's going to happen to me, man. Despite the laughable when she said in the video, and usually stage 6, it's about, this happens at about 2 to 3 years into your journey, and here I am, 8 years into it just now. Finally I've arrived on the shores of stage 6, and I'm like, okay, I'm an artist, I'm writing books, I'm a comedian, I'm never going to go back and work for another company again. If I do, I'm going to be an independent agent, have my own company. These are like the boundaries that I'm setting. This is the power that I'm standing in. I'm going to chase all those childhood dreams. I'm here. And I'm like, stage 6, 8 years in. And she's like, I swear, I think I spit on the screen when she's like, usually it takes 2 to 3 years to get here. And I'm like, I'm like, took me 8, lady. So there's no usual. Everyone's going to go at their own speed.
Everyone's different.
And I think you can get knocked back. And I think if you are committed to that authenticity and you are committed to allowing everything, and I think a lot of times, I don't know, we can discuss this toward the end of the video after this stage, Ray, but I think she teeters a few times on, I don't want to say bypassing, but distractions. Like when you're starting to feel bad or you're starting to do this, like go to this mantra, do this growing big thing. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the best advice. I think maybe as you're starting to feel those things or those negative things come in, really we should go into them. And I think that's what happened in my journey, is that I'm like, nope, get away. I'm in bliss, or I'm in this. I don't need that. I don't need that bad stuff. I don't need it. And I think that prolonged my journey, versus allowing and receiving those things and integrating them.
I think it's a combination of both,
I
because
knew you were going to say that.
a lot of those affirmations, what they're really doing is they're reminding you of who you really are. So a lot of let's say those negative stuff comes up. Let's say you get negative stuff that says, I'm worthless. And then what you're doing is you're reminding myself is, I am loving awareness. I am a manifestation of consciousness. I'm a manifestation of God, source, infinity. And that's true. Of like expanding yourself and seeing that you're more.
Seems that we may have lost Ray for a moment.
Okay, I'm here.
All right, that's good.
So
you said you are loving awareness. You're loving awareness.
It's reminding yourself of who you really are, because that, like we said before, that trance of unworthiness, you fell into that trance. So it's reminding yourself of who you really are. Now, do you need to go into that unworthiness? You may or you may not. I wouldn't say there's a 100% reason why you should always go into that. Sometimes I wouldn't say it's always bypassing, not to always go into that, but you're acknowledging though, at least acknowledge that it's there and accept that, okay, I'm feeling unworthy. You know what it is? It's because, you know, someone didn't say hi to me at work who I liked or something like that. And you know
Mm.
what it is. Do you need to sit there and do an hour's worth of shadow work over that? Probably not. So you could, so you know, so but it's one of those things. It's like, do you need to do that? Maybe, maybe not. You kind of have to.
What is
Yeah,
the most loving practice for you in that moment of time?
right.
Maybe it
Yeah,
is to go into it for an hour. Maybe it's not.
maybe not. Yeah, I think if it's consistently you're feeling that same feeling of unworthiness, then
Then yeah,
worse.
that makes sense because then your subconscious is lovingly presenting to you in a frequency that maybe you should, maybe. All right, this is the fourth time. Are you going to listen now? Like, okay. Let me go into this a little deeper because it keeps popping up. Yeah, I think
Right.
that's really that's a good point. Yep. So, are we done with stage 6? You think?
I think so. I don't have anything else to add about that. Do you?
No. Connect to your soul path. You're here with great purpose. You live your mission. These are all things that she said happen during the stage, and then she transitions into the her 3 tips of how you can better deal with these stages along your spiritual
Yes.
awakening
First,
path.
surrender, which surrender is tough, you know, and really, I would have to say this about surrender, that real true surrender is not a choice. Because as long as your ego thinks it has an option to cope with something or a way out, your ego is always going to try to maneuver. So really, true surrender is almost like, you ever play like tic-tac-toe and you know you lost? You know, you put the X in the
Yeah,
corner, you know, the one way,
you're
you're
like it's
done.
over. It's over.
That way,
It's over.
it's over.
Yeah,
So it's like, but as long as the ego thinks it has another move, like even like in chess, you know, you're going to be checkmated. It's like you're always going to be you're somehow subconsciously, subliminally, you're going to try to do some kind of technique or some kind of advantage. You know, maybe if I say this mantra 100 times standing on my head, maybe that will make it go away. Or if I
right.
read this book, or if I listen to this YouTube video,
Yeah,
or if I go whatever, go to Utah, go to Maui, this will help me.
yeah.
And it's sort of almost when you're out of options, when you're completely out of options, that's when the ego truly surrenders. But I get what she's saying, you know, just I think she means more acceptance. Just accept where you're at in this moment. If you're in the dark night, like, okay, you know, I'm in the dark night. This is what's going on. All these thoughts, all these crazy thoughts are coming through my mind right now. I know they're not me. It's not who I am. It's not my identity. I'm going to allow it. And that's really what awakening is. Awakening is really a shift in identity from the story of self to who you really are. And that's really what that all is. And that's the reason why we have such a hard time, because we're so attached to that story of how we think our life should be and who we think we are and who we think this person is in relation to us and how we're supposed to go through this journey and become this and that. That's what we're attached to. And that's when that starts to fall apart, that's what usually what causes the trauma, and, you know, maybe related to some motivated reason why we're trying to compensate from something in the past. So that's really what kind of starts all that. So it's a shift in identity. So it's going back to acceptance. It's just accepting where you're at, wherever stage you're in. Except this is where I'm at, and, you know, this video does a really good job. And I wish this video was around, you know, years ago. It would have made the acceptance process to go a lot faster.
And you know, just to this particular first tip of hers, uh, and total agreement with what you're saying there. And I wish that the phrase "what we resist persists" was introduced to me, you know, back in my teen years, and not just introduced to me, but explained to me. And you know, it's a Carl Jung thing. It's something that I learned through my partner in Teal Swan, and here she is echoing it again. Basically, I mean, whatever you push, resistance. It's just like she said, if I'm dragging you down the street and you're, grabbing onto things, it's going to take you longer, and it's going to, it's going to cut you up even more severely unless you just go, fine, drag me down the street. And it's a tough way to look at it, because like you said, your ego is going to do everything to not allow someone to just do that, and you're just giving up. But I think when what actually helped me with resistance and during some of these stages, and actually being able to navigate through them and move on to the next ones, was cannabis. Cannabis was a plant medicine that helped me release resistance through times that maybe without the help of that plant, I wouldn't have been able to do it as gracefully, or maybe it would have taken me twice as long. I've been in year 16 of my first spiritual awakening. But yeah, that's why I say it's a plant that helped save my life. Never abusing a plant or allowing it to become a crutch the way I did, but if used properly, can definitely help you through some tough times, and why it has become medicinally improved in certain areas of the country and stuff, because it's definitely a helpful tool if it's not taken advantage of.
Right. Second part tip, she says to work with your heart. Listen to your heart.
I'm sorry. I was just saying, listen. I wasn't saying I could. My bad, Ray. Usually I do that when I'm like, I can't hear you, Ray. And he's like, oh shit, internet's down. Yeah, no, yeah. Listen. Go ahead. Listen with your heart.
Just listen to your heart and work with your heart. That's kind of what I do with Reiki. She recommends doing the tapping or putting your hand over your heart. We've discussed that in other videos. I like to use the technique of Reiki, which you don't need to be attuned to Reiki to really do that. It's just giving yourself love, and just maybe putting your hands over your heart or wherever you feel stress or discomfort. And it goes back to self-care and realizing that you're not those thoughts, that what you are is that love within, and connecting with that. And it's sort of, like I said, like a shift in identity where you kind of like connect with that part of yourself, that wisdom of the heart. And you see through that it's all that stuff, all those thoughts that keep running through your mind it's just programmed stuff. It's just all ego. It's all really old coping mechanisms that are no longer useful or have expired.
I think all three of the tips, and we'll get to the third one in just a minute, but all three of them all have to do with the same thing, and that's coming from the place of your heart, man. It's coming from the place of operating from your heart center. I know that, like when you freestyle, for instance, right? Like, or at least when I do, like freestyle rapping, I'm talking about. If I try to calculate the words in the next line from up here, and I try to see things from my mind's eye with a beat in the background, I can get far, but I can't get as deep, and I can't do it as flowy and as rich as I do when I'm able to unplug from this and flow from here. If I just allow this to be the expression vehicle and for the words and for the imagery to come out of my heart, man, that is freestyle fire. And that,
can you give us an example?
I'm not going to do it right now, but it might, I don't have a beat, right? If I had a beat, it would be another thing, but but you've always put me on the spot, bastard. But yeah, if you had a beat ready, I might take you up on it. But anyway,
I don't have a beat ready. Sorry.
Maybe next time. You can call me out in the next episode and be like, hey, John, I got a little surprise for you here. And then I'll just have to flow, man.
Right.
It's too bad you can't pass me a virtual joint, because then I'd really be in it. And that was in reference to that was releasing resistance too. And that's when I discovered that, because a lot of times you tell people, don't live in your head, live in your heart, live in your head. And I didn't understand how to, do that. Like, okay, live here. How do you live here? What does that even mean? And the
Right.
cannabis helped me to do that, to connect with my heart, to just totally leave this and be in this. And again, a great tool to help you see that and understand. Now, I don't need that now, but I better understand it as a result of that plant medicine and connecting with it in that way, because now it made me understand how to do that and why I would want to do that, and releasing resistance of this and living here. And it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a really, it makes you smile when you can do that too, and you can, turn this off and tune in here. It's such a, I think it's just one of the greatest feelings on the planet.
Yeah, usually what I do is, if a lot of times if I get a lot of these disturbing thoughts, is I go into my feelings. I bring my awareness to my feelings rather than my thoughts. So I may feel depressed, and then what happens is, if I stay with just my feelings, I find that I eventually return back to my heart, and I return to that love. So I guess that's the next tip. She says detach from the mind, which is sort of the same thing.
Yeah, look, I need to ask you about that, because I loved her. I loved the entire video. I still do. I think it's a great gift for anyone and everyone that's going through it, that's never been through it. And before we end the podcast, I'd like to talk on a few points of folks that have not yet experienced a spiritual awakening, and how we might help them, maybe, I don't want to say trigger them into one, but just some ideas maybe that you have. But before we do that, getting ahead of myself, this was the one tip I had a problem with. Did you feel the same, or did you feel like you vibed with her point here on detaching from the mind and the things she said around that?
I think that there is some conflict between different spiritual teachers on this point. I think this is very Zen-like, is to witness the mind, witness the thoughts. And really what you're doing is you're breaking identity with thoughts. It doesn't mean that you don't always have to throw the mind away. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think that's the correct thing, is you acknowledge the thoughts, you acknowledge the mind. What it is, there's a shift that happens where the mind becomes the servant rather than the master. And the heart becomes the master. And that's really, I think that's really what enlightenment really is. And so you accept those thoughts. You're like, okay, those thoughts are there. I don't need to go into them. Sometimes they flash in your head, sort of like headlines on a TV scroll. And sometimes you get caught up in them. Sometimes you don't, and you witness them. Sometimes there's definitely useful thoughts. Like if something's, sometimes if there's some kind of danger ahead of you, you want to listen to your thoughts. But most, if you really pay attention to your thoughts, most of your thoughts are the same thoughts you've had yesterday and the week before. Most of the thoughts in your mind are really just ridiculous if you really pay attention to them coming through. And some of those thoughts are about just things that happen, different opinions. Sometimes it's different judgments that kind of pop up, and you don't allow yourself to get pulled into all that crap. You kind of just let it be. You let your mind thoughts. You don't try to stop the flow of thoughts, because you can't do that. You just let your mind be, and you stay in your heart. And after a while, it's almost like life becomes a meditation. And you get pulled out of your heart, you get pulled into thought, and then you keep returning back to your center. It's a process of keep centering yourself, keep returning to the heart.
So how would you say you would differentiate her term and her tip is refocusing? That's the word she used, was refocus. Yeah. How would you differentiate refocusing in said moment versus bypassing? What's the difference here? What would bypassing be versus refocusing?
I think bypassing, it has to do more with feelings, not thoughts. So really you're bypassing your feelings, not your thoughts. And really, like if you think about a trigger that happens, the trigger is usually, like, let's say you say something to me that was triggered and it brings up a feeling. That feeling could be associated with a trauma from my past. It's not really so much what you said, So really when you're doing shadow work, you're following the root of that feeling. So I think that's really the difference is between the thoughts and the feelings. So you don't bypass your feelings, but the thoughts, I mean, I could sit here and think of things and make myself cry. It does, all of us could sit there and change our feelings by thinking a certain way, but sometimes we can't always control that in our external environment. So be with your feelings, be with the heart, allow your thoughts to flow. It's all about accepting what is, and just be in a total acceptance, and don't resist anything.
Okay. I knew you'd be able to bring clarification to tip number 3 for me. Before we spill into your cards, I know you're headed there. Let's briefly touch on what I brought up a few moments ago. So this video is great for people that are going through it, for people that have been through it. I think it's a great video to maybe give to somebody that's never been through a spiritual awakening, right?
Right.
So they are aware of, oh, this is a thing, right? Because maybe they've been at that place that I was several times and they were at stage one, not knowing that there was more beyond that and so much more, a whole different life, right?
Definitely when it comes to the dark night and the void period, I mean, I think that's really where you would want to hand someone this video. Because I think maybe if you're in the bliss stage, you may be too naive to really listen to.
That's it too. But how
you're
do
almost
we
like a teenager.
how do we or do maybe this is another video another time, maybe you can drop some things in the comments below, folks. Give us some ideas. But how do you, I know it's not our responsibility, but we're all out in our communities and we plant our seeds and we meet young folks and old ones alike, and we have our conversations. How can you, or is there anything you can do to help lead someone to that door of awakening? Maybe you see that they're at the precipice, or maybe you just
No,
no.
you can't. You want to, but you can't. You want to, but you can't. You want to so bad because you want other people to experience what you experience, and you want them to have that bliss, and you want them to be like, oh, don't you see how it is? And it doesn't really work. You can't do it. Everybody awakens at the right time when they need to.
So the best thing,
not a minute sooner, not a minute later.
What I'm hearing then is to just compassionately and lovingly just meet people where they're at without any agenda as to introducing them to anything new, unless they ask you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Like, hey, this is what I'm into. If you want to listen to this, or I think this could help you, but you don't do it thinking like, oh, I hope they're gonna like.
Gosh, do you know, when I look back, I cannot even tell you how many, probably hundreds of people dropped little seeds in my lap, and I was unknowingly just didn't. But then after knowing, just thinking about those moments when I was in a restaurant working as a server, and someone left a little note in the tip card about a quote or something, or a book, or hey, have you ever read this book, like you said, or just little things, man. And like looking back going, oh my gosh, I was getting hit in the face with all these winged brilliant beings saying, hey John, I'm here, are you ready to awaken? I'm like, fuck that shit, man. Not ready for you. Get away.
Right.
But all right, take us away with a Bodhi Wolf card reading.
I'm gonna pull a card from the Osho Zen deck, one of my favorite decks there is.
Such a great deck.
Such a great deck. So this is going to be for the collective.
Can you pull a card for my fantasy team this week?
Getting my Bodhi zone.
This card is for my fantasy team, folks.
Ooh, I have Beyond Illusion. All right, so I'm gonna look this bad boy up. Da-da-da. All right. The butterfly in this card represents the outer, that which is constantly moving, and that which is not real but an illusion. Behind the butterfly is the face of consciousness, looking inward to that which is eternal. The space between the two eyes has opened, revealing the lotus of spiritual unfoldment and the rising sun of awareness. Through the rising of the inner sun, meditation is born. The card reminds us not to look outside for what is real, but to look within. When we focus on externals, we too often get caught up in judgments. This is good, this is bad, I want this, I don't want that. These judgments keep us trapped in our illusions, our sleeplessness, our old habits and patterns. Drop your opinionated mind and move inside. There you can relax into your own deepest truth, where the difference between dreams and reality is already known.
Got me tapping on my heart, Ray.
That's really good. Kind of goes good with the awakening.
Yeah.
The topic you just did.
Yeah, and it really it speaks to those of you in stage 4 too, and the illusion of disconnection. There is life beyond that illusion, man.
And our judgments and opinions, especially with everything going on right now with politics and everything else, it's just going inward and not being so triggered by the external world and maintaining that inner peace.
Easier said than done, but a challenge for our audience for sure to turn the lens in, jump in the heart. Ray, where you may have mentioned this, but remind me, where would you say you're at now in your stages of your present awakening?
I would say number 5.
So you're out of the void.
I'm out of the void. I'm into the groundedness. Hard for me to say.
You're into the roundedness, or the?
Well, yeah.
Put down a few pounds. Me too. Yeah.
Right.
No,
but
no,
I feel like I've stepped out of the void now. I feel like I was just in that void and where nothing was happening and nothing was flowing. But I feel now that life is starting to move forward for me, and I'm starting to be that expression of authenticity. So yeah, that's where I'm at right now, I would say.
That's an exciting time, man.
Yeah.
And a peaceful time too, I think.
Right. Where I think it's being centered. It's knowing that even if something does trigger me, it's okay. It's okay to be triggered, and it's okay because it's like it's sort of like, okay, I dealt with the worst, and I made it. I survived. So it gives you that sort of faith, that confidence moving forward.
So when I met you, would you say you were leaving 3 and stepping into 4?
When I met you, I was kind of in the blissful stage.
Really?
Yeah, I was in the blissful stage at that point.
Where was I at, man? Oh no,
well,
I was.
It depends. You know what though? Sometimes there's different stages of your life where you are in that blissful stage, but just because you're in that blissful stage doesn't mean there could be other areas of your life that you feel could need improvement as well. So. You could be doing great, and we could be doing great in one area and still have, feel a little bit off or maybe a little unstable in one area too.
So it was like almost a year, really, from when we left Utah to when we started doing the podcast. So you'd say that when we left each other in Utah, you started going through another dark night.
Yeah, that's kind of like when it was starting to happen. Kind of like right near pretty much almost right at the beginning of this year is when I started.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So being that it's not your first time, you were well equipped to navigate through those seas a little more expertly, right?
Yeah, I think learning the completion process was really to help me get through this and help me get through this at a very, very rapid pace. So I really owe a lot to Teal and to the completion process for that.
That's really cool. And then you were in your void, and then your void delivered you to like this next place of groundedness is where so we're actually doing a podcast together, right?
Right.
which allows you to even step more firmly into your authenticity and power on a weekly basis and express to 21 countries. Sweden, we love you. Thank you for joining us. Sweden in the house. 21 countries, 103 subscribers on YouTube, Facebook thing, Instagram. Guys, we're everywhere. It's official. I got the email that we are on Apple Podcasts. I already thought we kind of were, but maybe not fully. Yeah, but we didn't get. I didn't get the official email until the other day, which maybe now we're more visible in Apple Podcasts. Like people can search us more, find us better. I don't know. We're excited though. Every week it just feels like growth and possibility. Really, we Ray and I talk about when's the world tour start? Where are we going to start the world tour? We even joked earlier today about starting at Epcot, doing a little around the world, just to get into that feeling signature of doing the damn thing.
Right.
So whatever. Ray's bent on Morocco. So Morocco, if you're out there listening, we hope you still are. Help us get there.
We're coming for you.
We're coming. We need a place to crash, Morocco. So, yeah. Well, Ray, thank you for so intimately sharing your story and being vulnerable and true and raw and all that stuff that we aspire to be on this show. I think it helps people connect with their journeys. I know it always helps me bring light to mine and why I value and love our friendship. And
definitely.
Until week 4 when we face off in fantasy or whenever. I'm just kidding. I can't believe we're doing fantasy football, but I haven't played in years, but it's just a fun thing to do and get together, do some trash talking and be silly and whatever. We can't leave our houses anyway, so might as well watch some pigskin being thrown around. But what else we got? Ray, you got any housekeeping stuff? Any things you want to tell or ask the audience?
Not really anything else. I mean, if you guys have any ideas of who we should cover or even just a specific topic, let us know. Drop us a comment or whatever. Facebook, YouTube, everything. We'll respond. I mean, this one right here was brought to my attention through a friend. So, and look, it was a great video. I probably would have never found or seen this video if it wasn't for her. So I never heard of Christina Lopes.
I've already started following her on Instagram. She's The Heart Alchemist. So that's Instagram, The Heart Alchemist. She's on YouTube. She's got a channel of over 221,000 subscribers. I subscribe to that. I want to know what she's doing. I dig her style. I like her delivery. And it'd be neat to see what other type of support materials, content she puts out there. For sure.
Definitely. I like this video. That was very
good job, Christina. Good job, Ray. Bodhi Ray. Guys, Bodhi Ray. Let's give it up for Bodhi Ray for bringing us another gem. And we talked, we always do the pre-podcast chat. One day, maybe that'll be Patreon material because it's fire, man. we think that's a podcast in and of itself, man. I think you guys, that's like our Howard Stern version of the Bodhi Bros. Yeah. That's I'd pay for that material. But what was I saying? We talked about lost the train of thought.
I think you were talking about Christina Lopes, and then you were saying about this video.
That doesn't help at all. Whatever. Anyway, that's just me teasing you about the bonus material, folks. It's just such good stuff. And as soon as I hit the unrecord button, is that a thing? Unrecord? Stop recording, whatever. It'll pop to the forefront of my mind. But yeah. Great stuff. Thank you, Bodhi Ray. Oh, yes, this is what it was. See, I'm not just screwing with you guys. It was that, why does it keep slipping from my mind, man? This is funny. You
rely too much on that herb.
Oh, stop. No, I haven't done that in like a year, man. You just said something along the lines of, shit, I can't believe I lost it. It was right there at the tip of my tongue. All right, guys. Well, fuck it.
The third time you'll get it.
It's gone. It's freaking gone. It's gone. It's gone. Oh, yes, here it is. You've been so good at bringing things to us, and we talk about how every week, yes, I got it back. Every week, how these videos have pertained to our life,
Yeah.
and how we've been able to apply them, the lessons we've learned. And so dude, that's hot for me, man. I love that. I love that. I walk away from this, even the ones that I don't want to watch, or I'm like, oh, here we go. Or, what has he brought me this time? It's always, gosh, it's so applicable, potato, whatever. You can plug it in, man, and I can't wait to whatever it is you choose next week, because I know it'll be valuable, and I know I'll be able to come up with stories from the past, but also ground in the present with it, and see where we want to apply it in the future. And
Right.
and that's, dude, I hope you guys out there in the audience are able to do the same, or somewhat along those lines. Without any further ado, I bid you a beautiful fare thee well till next we meet for episode 17. I'm John with a J.
I'm Bodhi Ray. Namaste.
See you next time.
Yeah.
That's all, folks.